I'm Herman Martinez. I live here in Alamosa, Colorado, and I've been associated with the public schools for the past 40 years. I'm a retired educational administrator. I've worked in higher education, public schools, early childhood, in that order. Started working with teenagers who were aspiring to go to college back in the 70s. Worked in the public schools as a teacher and administrator in the 80s and 90s, and worked in early childhood education the last part of my working career. We work diligently to create materials and establish workshops, classes, utilizing the best of the authors of the region, the interpreters of the traditions of the native pueblos along the Rio Grande, and the native families who settled here about 250 years ago. So we utilize that as our canvas, as our route for establishing educational programs, educational materials, and we do concerts, as I mentioned, lecture demonstrations, classes, and the Summer Institute. And that's primarily where my work has generated over the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of this work my wife Patricia and I have done over the last 40 to 45 years, but usually after 5 o'clock. So that was kind of our passion after work, to work with communities, work with youth, work with their families on special projects. For 19 years, we directed Semillas de la Tierra and El Conjunto Nuevo Aztlán here at Adams State University. Again, in the evenings, working with students who wanted to learn more about Mexican music and Mexican folk dance. We were able to generate the offering into a credit-bearing course from freshman through graduate studies. I might mention also that in 1974, my wife Patricia and I, through an initiative here at Adams State, el Grupo Folclórico Semillas de la Tierra, and the musical group, which is El Conjunto Nuevo Aztlán. Semillas is the dance component. We founded an association that brought together groups of individuals, primarily from universities, but also from community organizations, some schools, public schools, and every summer began hosting dance and music festivals. That eventually became an international exchange opportunity for students, in particular students who attended Adams State University in the 70s and 80s, to work with some of the prominent music and dance instructors from throughout Mexico. We worked diligently in coordinating working arrangements with cultural centers, Casas de la Cultura, and universities throughout Mexico, and working with faculty members to bring them to our campuses here in the United States every summer, and or taking them on site to a university or a cultural center in Mexico. So we had that opportunity at that time. Again, really working hard to develop more materials, make it more of a learning and challenging experience for students who, again, were partaking in music and dance, the folk expressions of Middle America and the Southwest. And this summer we opened the 41st conference that was being hosted at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. Patricia and I were opening conference speakers, carrying on that tradition, and that association continues today. When I left Adams State, I went to work in Pueblo, and I had a friend who had been a classmate of mine in high school and college here at Adams, and he was on a Ford Foundation grant experience traveling in the United States, and he'd call me from different places during his travels, and he was working with various community organizations through his program, and he'd say, you know, there's going to be funding for programs at colleges. Would you be interested in coming back and working with me in developing a program? And I said, well, keep me posted. And he would call me from Austin. He called me from the Coachella Valley in Southern California. He would call me from the Midwest. And we remained in contact, and finally he said, you know, there's a grant that has been written in Washington, D.C. for 4 college assistance migrant programs. And Adams State has been chosen to be one. You want to come back and help me run that program? And I was busy teaching and looking at other programs beyond my current employment, and my wife and I thought long and hard, because she was teaching in the public schools of Pueblo also, and I said, okay, I'll go for 1 year. Well, as it turned out, I stayed here for 10 years. So there needed to be more advocacy to engage people in participating in their communities and breaking a lot of the old stereotypes of inferiority, of not being included in society. Students were arriving because of the GI Bill. A lot of veterans were returning back from Vietnam at this point in the 70s when we opened the doors to a program at Adams State called ALMA, Advanced Leadership for Migrant Americans. And we offered credit-bearing courses in study skills. We had a study skills lab that we opened here at the college, the university now. We had psychology of adjustment. We would bring students in 3 weeks prior to the beginning of fall to allow them to adjust to a college experience. And this was in the 70s, so anywhere from 85 to 90% of the students that were coming to Adams State through the reaches of the ALMA program were first-time students in their community. You know, they were non-traditional students, first in their families to come to college. So their high school experiences hadn't been that preparatory. A lot of them didn't have a lot of insight in terms of what it took to not only get here, but to survive. So we offered psychology of adjustment courses. We offered cultural studies that eventually became Chicano studies here on campus at that time, later on. We offered folklorico, which is music and dance, cultural offerings. And we worked with all of the departments at Adams State to begin to look closely at how we could reinforce the instructional efforts that were occurring. So we developed we developed tutoring programs that were ongoing throughout the school year. We offered graduate assistantships to graduate students who wanted to be counselors to help students begin planning beyond their freshman year. And we began working as co-sponsors for the United Mexican American Student Organization that had just formed on campus. So there was a lot of awareness occurring in terms of people who were becoming activists in their communities, activists on campus, to again begin looking at how students could be successful in a very, very unassuming environment. And you know, failure was staring everyone in the face because a lot of the skill levels were not where they should have been for students that were coming in, so there was a lot of work to be done. So in terms of what was going on at Adams State, there were a lot of ingenious expressions being shared with students and the community at large, the Adams State College community in particular, in terms of how people could bond together to make it a successful experience for youth who were struggling and were going to struggle and beyond the first year. But the goal was, and continues to be today, is retention. To educate youth who, again, will become future leaders in their communities, in the schools in particular. A lot of emphasis on campus was to gather literature that was being produced at that time, and again, everything seemed to be happening because in view of the Chicano rights movement, in retrospect, I think you could see it as a renaissance, because things were beginning to happen with literature that had never come into focus, at least not in my 12, 14, 16 odd years in education. I'd never seen anything that recognized, my community, my family, my culture. And a lot of books were being written by individuals like Rudy Acuna from the West Coast, from Julian Zamora, who had Colorado ties, who was at Notre Dame, from Aurelio Espinosa, who grew up here in the Valley and was a literary chair at Stanford University. A lot of the literature that was beginning to surface was surfacing in the 70s, and students through Chicano studies and through sociology and anthropology courses were coming into contact with that. And so it was bringing about a new awareness. I mentioned the Crusade for Justice in Denver. Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, who founded the organization and directed it, wrote an epic poem that, again, instilled in many, many educators and future educators the reflection of endurance, of legacies, of heritage, of culture, of traditions, of language, and taking a critical look at a social agenda that was at our forefront in the social and health areas, educational fields, where we had a lot of ground to make up. And a lot of organizations were being formed to stimulate that effort and continue today. As students began to become aware of the information, and there were some very dynamic directors of Chicano studies came to Adams State University back in the mid-70s and stayed through the late 80s, who again brought a lot of material, and students were very, very emphatic in making sure that these novels, these texts, these journals, magazines, newsletters could be consolidated and create a space at the university for those resource materials, and in particular to be placed in the Nielsen Library. Many of the authors of those publications came by invitation to Adams State to speak and to share their expertise, their work presently and in the future, their intentions, again, to highlight and filling in gaps in education and history that existed, that didn't reflect on the contributions of many of the populations and groups in the Southwest that were underrepresented in education, be it in the public schools or in universities, public and private. So those materials, again, created a kaleidoscope of knowledge, of beauty, of inquiry, that, again, allowed students to pursue fields in literature, become more precise in their approach to their studies in sociology and history, in various social studies. Those materials are in place at the university, and many of the professors who currently work at Adams today have their own personal libraries that they bring a wealth of information to their students in their classes, and are also able to draw from the resources at the university, in particular the library, knowing that today with the digital age we can go way beyond that. And through education, we felt that was the great equalizer. people could go back in their communities to be teachers, to be social workers, to be attorneys, to expand and become not only authors but researchers for future works that are still pending today in creation. I felt more discrimination when I made my big return back to the San Luis Valley in the late 80s, early 90s. I had poured my soul out here at this institution, Adams State in particular, and worked really hard to make students feel comfortable in their new settings, advocated in a positive way with administrators, and went off and pursued higher education in several forms. And when I came back, I discovered that I was really ostracized from within. So that carried on not only at the university but in the public schools, a lot of places where I would apply. There was a shadow that hadn't lifted, and the more I looked into it, the more I heard that I was controversial, that I maybe was not an asset in the community, but a distraction. And I attribute that to the work that I did to make sure that students were well received and successful coming to Adams State in an environment that in some senses were very rejecting to efforts to try and help students who needed extra help, who did not necessarily fit into the mold of the recruitment efforts that were occurring and the competition for those students throughout the state of Colorado in particular. And we had many mentors and people that motivated us to do that work. Had a lot of help from Dr. Arnold Chavez, who was the individual who helped develop the ADMA program at Adams State that I worked with for several years. I later became the director of that program. Again, there are great mentors out there. They need to be sought out, and some are not high profile like these individuals became. There are many unsung heroes out there that work daily, that work hard, and always look for positive change. Always look for ways to make an impact, a positive impact in their communities and their schools and their families, and it's unlimited. They're out there. And we need to search for them because, again, they're there and it's our life. We need to search for them. We need to engage with them. We need to showcase them and again, just respect them. I would like to share that the symbol and the practice of a family, a familia, is indispensable. I think if anyone is to be rooted, it has to be through their family first. Not solely, but in particular, and embrace all of those people who have sacrificed and have contributed to where we are today as a society, and not let that go and really embrace those values, because that's the first thing that begins to diminish with independence and freedom and maturity, perhaps, we might call it that, to separate ourselves not only from our families but our communities and our initial goals. So again, reevaluating constantly where we're at, what it is we want to accomplish, what education means, not just to me, but to those we come in contact with, to those that we embrace, those that we dedicate our careers to in many situations. Always creating a balance between personal aspirations and your home community, and it all starts with family.